Well, this morning, it's almost this afternoon, I want to talk about the power of the Spirit in our life. And as I get older, in certain ways, I find that I am losing more and more confidence. Now, you can't do the same things I could do before in the same way. Now, not that ever I was that confident, but in youth, you tend to have, or people feel, well, I can do this and I can do that. So I want to take a look at what the Apostle Paul told Timothy, and we started with reading what Jesus had to say about he and the Father are one, how that the Father has given us into his hands that he will lose none of us. That's an incredibly confident statement to be made, and we can have that confidence because it is God who makes that statement. It is Jesus who makes that statement on our behalf. So when we look at 2 Timothy, and we're going to hear in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verses 6 and 7, here's what Paul tells Timothy. Now, let us be reminded of the character of Timothy. Timothy is this evidently a young man who grew up with his mom and grandmother. I don't know how many fights that Timothy got into, but I'm suggesting that mom and grandma didn't let him get into many fights at all, just by the nature. When boys grow up with dads and all of that, they tend to be a little different. So I think Timothy was a little soft in the standards. But the heart of Timothy was incredible. He had learned scriptures from his mother and his grandmother and the like. But he had an incredible challenge. The incredible challenge that Timothy had was dealing with smart alecks, religious smart alecks of their day. Older guys who thought they knew what they knew and how they knew all these things. And it was just difficult for Timothy. So here's what Paul tells Timothy. He says here, "For this reason I remind you to fan the flame, the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands." So it is the Apostle Paul who had the confidence in this young man to ordain him into ministry and remind him that with the laying on of hands, the coming of the Holy Spirit in his life, it is the power that is within his life. So he wanted to remind him to stir it up. Now, I think it's important for us to recognize just the fact of fanning the flame, because God, the Holy Spirit, can kind of begin to take back seat in our life. On the day of Pentecost, it was front and center. It was the power that everyone was excited about it. But we're about to approach what we call the dog days of summer. And spiritually speaking, we can do the same way. We're tired, it's hot, we're out of energy, and all of these things, and we got a lot of problems, and we can't do things. So the Holy Spirit in our life and the recognition of God being in our life begins to take a little bit of the back seat. So he says, I want to remind you to stir this up. Stir up the Holy Spirit. And that is recognizing it, allowing God to work in our lives and the power that is there. And then he says, for God did not give us a spirit of timidity. In the King James, I think it expresses it as well, did not give us a spirit of fear, but rather he has given us a spirit of power, of love, and of self-discipline. Or in the King James, it says sound mind. It is with these thoughts in mind, I want to take a look today at the admonition of the Apostle Paul to Timothy about the gift of God, the power of the Holy Spirit in a Christian's life, in your life, my life. Because Christians often feel either we're often feel or may act powerless. We tend to do that. Who are we? And that can happen to us. Christians can be crippled with fear, especially in the world in which you live, and when things kind of build up and you feel overwhelmed. And it is very easy to be overwhelmed in Timothy's world, where people everywhere were coming at him. There were so many who were vying for the office and trying to undercut him and the like. In our world today, we get overwhelmed because things just keep coming at us and coming at us and coming at us and coming at us. And if you look at the news, you got that. But oftentimes, if you're just looking at your own life and your own life situation, your own neighborhood, your own kitchen, or whatever, life can be overwhelming. And then, as well, Christians may try to go it alone. You know, if we don't actively involve the Holy Spirit, are we in essence going it alone? And how does that work? And then Christians may need to be reminded again, and this is what Paul did with Timothy. Remind Timothy. Timothy, you need to be reminded of the incredible gift that God has given to you. So there are three elements that the Apostle Paul emphasizes here about the Holy Spirit. That the Spirit is powerful. How powerful? Well, you read scriptures, the Spirit moved upon the face of the earth and things were changed and transformed. We're talking powerful, mighty powerful, more powerful than nuclear bombs, more powerful than anything that we can conjure up in our own mind. At the same time, he says it is a spirit of love. Now, that's a contrast. So what we have to, and the challenge for us is in the world in which we live, what do powerful people do with their power? How do they operate? How are powerful people in our country operating today? How are people who want power operating? And why do they want power? What is their goal and objective when we're asking about power? People want power basically because they want control. And once they have control, what do they do and how do they operate? You know, we look back in politics back in the 50s and 40s and people of great power who did everything back in the back rooms filled with cigar smoke. Well, we've moved it out front now and it's filled with perfume. But still, it's about power and it is about control and our own personal agenda. The third thing about the Spirit is a sound mind. Now, we tend to think that in our world we can reason and we can self-discipline ourselves and the like, but what is a sound mind? It is what we think is best for us. We think best maybe just for our group or whatever it might be. What is a sound mind? How do we think? Because if we look at thinking 50 years ago and thinking today, it has been incredibly transformed. In some ways to the good, in other ways to the bad. So just take for example, back in the 50s, we're watching Ozzie and Harriet, Father Knows Best, and there are no suggestions of immorality or whatever. It was very, very hidden. But anyway, compare that with anything that you might flip on TV today and what's going on. So a sound mind. So let's take a look for a moment at the Greek word that is used here for power. It means force, specifically and miraculous power.
The world today is a challenging environment for Christian believers and followers of Jesus Christ. Looking for answers? Grace Communion International local churches in Fairfield, Santa Rosa, and Modesto offers a comforting environment for Christians in search of spiritual growth and development. Contact our local ministry. Attend our local GCI churches at the times listed on your screen.